And we have, want to thank you for joining. We have three readers tonight, Michelle Pond, Toy Wagner, and Divya Ramesh. That's the order they'll be reading in. And I'll introduce Michelle Pond, who is a poet and photographer who likes sports, jazz, and art inspired by other art. She also is a veteran who served in the U.S. Marine Corps, published a chapbook of grief poems, I Keep You With Me. Her work also has appeared in publications such as Thorny Locust Magazine, The Enigmatist, and Kansas City Time and Place, an anthology of Heartland poetry. Combines original photographs and poems into visual art pieces that are exhibited in the Kansas City, Missouri metropolitan area. Please welcome Michelle Pond.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming, and thanks for the Riverfront Reading Committee for inviting me to read this month. As you heard at the end of my biography, I do combine original photographs and poems into visual art pieces. And so I go out exploring for photographs, and one of the places I do that is South Lake Park in Overland Park. And so I've chosen tonight to read all poems from the park, so that it'll kind of be like taking a walk in the park with all of you. And I take photographs of whatever catches my eye. I do like shadows and reflections, and of course, all of the animals and trees, and then various things that are seasonal, like ice in the winter and the flowers in the spring and summer. So I'll make a few comments on a few of the poems, but generally I'm just going to go through them. The first one is called A Walk in the Park. I take a walk in the park, spend time with some winged things, see them fly, walk and swim, watch the fish make a splash. The dragonflies are lightning fast. Reflect on all in this space. It does my heart good. Alone in a bright blue sky. I saw a cloud alone in a bright blue sky. I wondered how it would make use of all the space in which it could move. As I watched, the cloud appeared to hover over a group of trees. I thought I saw it reach out to the tallest, even though it had no chance to touch it. Tentative connections. Like a shadow that touches two trees, my connections are tentative. Batteries run down, signals are dropped. I am virtually frustrated. I have no choice but to stay online until once again I can reach out under my own power. Unfortunately, not everything in nature is beautiful. And so this next poem is about a vulture that I saw flying in the park one day. It's called Circle Back. The vulture flies in circles high above the park. Once, twice, thrice, then it breaks the pattern, makes a straight line for the outskirts. I feel relief until I see a shadow down the path. The vulture didn't leave. It circled back to survey another section. Once, twice, thrice. Then the vulture breaks the pattern. Relief doesn't come. The shadow does. And this next poem was inspired by a goose standing on one leg, which they often do. And in particular, I like to take pictures of them standing on the ice in winter, because there's usually a reflection, and there's sort of an odd effect where the reflection leg and the real leg meet, and so the goose looks very tall. And so I like to capture those when I can. For this next poem, this was not in the winter, so it was standing on the ground. Balancing. It is hard to maintain my balance. Focus on the do's instead of the don'ts. Shake off the doubts about the surety of my security. Still, I keep my sense of humor. If I'm going to fall, I would rather fall down laughing. This next poem is a persona poem. Hold on to me. I hang around her neck. She cradles me in one hand so I don't bounce as we walk. We stop. I move upward until the viewfinder reaches her eye. My lens moves back and forth as she gauges the distance. I feel the pressure on my shutter button. Then, click, we capture the scene. I move back down and rest in one hand. There isn't much she can touch right now, but she can still hold on to me. Beneath the tree. The shadow lies beneath the tree, covered in all that is lost. The shadow is temporary, the loss is not. And this next one was inspired by butterflies. It's called Beauty Lands. Beauty lands in front of me and stops me in my tracks. It comes to me on its own. I don't have to ask. I stand and watch it sit, flit, fly away. I am grateful anytime beauty comes my way. And this next poem was inspired by a single leaf sitting by itself on the walking path. A piece of myself. I left a piece of myself behind when I was just a child. I never bothered to go back for it. I thought it wouldn't matter. But even after all these years, there are times I wish I had it. Dried plants. Why does the dragonfly stop on the dried plant? The bright color is gone. All that was soft has become brittle. What does the dragonfly see that I can't? Perhaps a time when a stop here was sweeter. This next poem is a form poem, which I like to work in sometimes, called a danza. And so the first line of the first stanza becomes the last line of each of the following stanzas, and you can string as many stanzas together as you want. So the first stanza has five lines because the first line repeats in that one. And then the rhyme scheme is AABB in the other four lines. So this was a winter photograph when the lake was frozen. It was a bit of an overcast day, so the ice looked pretty dark, but the sun was starting to break through, and so there was a spot of light on the ice, and it's called See the Light. As long as I see the light, I feel peace of mind and let myself unwind. My spirits take flight as long as I see the light. I get worn down by the daily grind and what is happening to humankind. But I know I will be all right as long as I see the light. Stoneware. When I get a stone in my shoe, it hurts so much I have to stop. It feels like a rock that must be shredding my sock. Imagine my shock when I turn my shoe over and out drops a fragment that I can barely see. How could such pain come from something this size? Because it injures me stride after stride. Become one. The sky lays down on the lake. It doesn't make a splash. The action seems like happenstance, but it is guided by the sun. The area it covers turns bright blue with patches of white. Branches poke through the clouds. Ducks and geese swim on the fluff. The surrounding water sparkles. This is the beauty that is created when two elements we thought could never come together become one. Current circumstances. A gust of wind whips up the waves. The goose doesn't panic or fight against its current circumstances. It rocks in rhythm with the water, certain that calm will return as soon as the wind's strength is spent. Even in winter, I see a feather on the ground. The grass is brown, the dirt is muddy. The one left behind rests comfortably in its new space. If it is hurt, the wound doesn't show. Excuse me. Oh, this is another poem that was inspired by ice. When the lake begins to thaw, sometimes there are spots that crack and it kind of shatters into a bunch of different types of pieces. And but it stays kind of in the same vicinity until some more of the lake thaws. So this winter, when I saw this happen, it reminded me of jigsaw puzzle pieces. So this poem is called Put the Pieces Together. Reflect on the characteristics of each one. Group some together, understanding that they may work with others too. When they fit, celebrate. If they don't, keep trying until you see the complete picture. Stories in the shadows. I find stories in the shadows and fascinated by the thoughts the shapes elicit. I see a tall figure holding out two hoops. Is this the beginning of another show? Will the hoops soon be tossed about or start spinning? Or is this performer set to hand the hoops off to the next in line, then take a place in the audience? And this one was inspired by there are a lot of trees in this park right around the lake, and so there are some areas where the roots are exposed and they're really large. So that's what inspired this poem, which is called Our Roots. Encourage us to follow them. Connect us between now and then. Diverge and take us where imagination wouldn't. Give us answers that create questions. Anchor us and sometimes weigh us down. And I think I will just do one more. This is called Climb. And I looked up one day, I looked up into the trees. I'm usually looking for birds. And I saw that there was an airplane with a trail that was rising parallel to the tree trunk. So this is called Climb. Set your sights high and get on board. There will be turbulent days, so enjoy the smooth rides. Headwinds will impede your progress, but tailwinds will help you make up time. You will meet others with similar flight plans. Find ways to help each other climb. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. All right, our next reader is Chloe Wagner. Let me pull up her bio here. Chloe, whose name means young grass, a profusion of blooms, and the Greek goddess of unripe corn, has had her poems featured in the art show Nature and the Poet, a collection of poems by local artists profoundly moved by nature, co-sponsored by the Liberty Arts Commission and Carol Karyotis. Although she has submitted her work far too infrequently and often after being asked, she has been published in Friends Journal, the Montucky Review, and Thorny Locust, and can be heard on the CB's Jumpstart Arts Poetry Sampler #1 and Johnson County Library's Poetry Blitz. She's been a featured reader at Morning Day Cafe in Liberty, Missouri, and at the Neon Gallery and the 51st Street Coffee House in Kansas City, Missouri. She has read several times in the Poetry Slam hosted by Mark Smith at the Green Mill in Chicago, where Mark invented Poetry Slams in 1987, and has been a featured reader at Morning Day Cafe in Liberty, Missouri, and at the Neon Gallery and the 51st Street Coffee House in Kansas City. She's working on putting together a collection of her poems called Eating Light. Please welcome Chloe Wagner.
Okay, good. Okay, I was inspired by hearing Michelle's nature poem, so I'm going to start out with one of my nature poems. In my day job, I work in customer service with the IRS and take phone calls and also write letters. And one of the things that we use is a little page called Tools of the Trade. So that makes an appearance in this poem because this is a poem about a break that I took in our courtyard when we were still working in the building and not from home. We had beautiful water lilies and waterfowl and a heron. So this poem is called The Heron. The Heron. Taking a break from the numbers and the letters, tools of my trade, I see baby koi, goldfish, skirting ice forming on the pond of our courtyard. I think, fish, here are fish, and cold. It is quite cold. It is wonderful how the cold clears your mind of all extraneous thoughts. Then a heron, as if overhearing my thoughts of fish, flies over and lands on top of our building. I see just the silhouette of his long neck, then his body and legs as he steps to the edge. He is a big bird. I stand and stare in the cold. Then he flies away, long legs streaming behind. Okay, this one is called Morning Rays. I wrote this after I lost my mother. Morning rays. Most of the time, I sleep through the morning till it comes horning in with the blast of noonday rays at my window. I feel for my mother, for what we could never have, mourning the lost hours spent on. Your problem is you don't, and no one else is going to put up with my best hour with you, Mom, was when we sat holding hands on the bed at Rosewood. You told me how much you had begun to appreciate me because I could be still, and my brother never seemed to stop talking. Then we sat quietly as two Quakers as I basked in being near you. It was enough. And now there are so many questions I'd like to ask you, so many things about your past life I'd like to know. This is a poem that I wrote for my mother the year before she died. I had no idea that at the same time next year she was not going to be with us. And so I count this as the most important poem that I've ever written because I feel like it, in a way, repaired our relationship. It's called Burdock. What are the deep roots of your sorrow, Mama? I feel your pain and I cry for you, but I don't know why I'm crying. I just know it has roots much deeper than burdock. I'm a surrogate weeper, crying all those tears you never let yourself shed. You kept tidied away in the shed. I've been crying ever since I can remember. How many times has this been passed down through our line? Mother to daughter, mother to daughter. Come to me and let us feel our way back down to the ground, past the leaves and the stems and the stones to where the hurt began. Let us go get the garden hoe and we'll tackle it together. They say burdock is a weed, worthless, to be dug out and thrown away. But Mama, I've also seen it raised as a delicacy, priced dearly. Clearly, you are nature's own. Okay, this next poem I'm going to read, I wrote thinking of my days at UMKC. I had a teacher, Dan Jaffe. Some of you may have actually had Dan Jaffe as a teacher or met Dan Jaffe or knew Dan Jaffe. Unfortunately, he died last year. Unfortunately, he never heard this poem, but I was always afraid to show this poem to him because he was very critical of all our poems. I have to say I would not be the poet that I am today if it were not for Dan Jaffe, but it is a double-edged sword, so I did have writer's block for a long time afterwards, and I didn't care to experience that again. So Dan, unless someone else shared it with him, Dan never got to hear this poem. I did read it though on the stage at the Green Mill in Chicago, where they had the poetry slams, and then the band asked me what kind of music I wanted to back me up. I said, a pirate shanty. So this is called Professors of Poetry, to Dan Jaffe. A toddle of turtles opined in the pines, tut-tutting turtles in tweed with fine wine. They just couldn't get over our cumbersome rhymes, so we ran round the block to tighten our lines. As we ran round the block to tighten our lines. We tightened our tenses and tensed up our lines. We junked all the Jussive, Juraxi, quinine. Too better. We cried on our rhymes. We just couldn't get over our cucumber vines. No, we couldn't get over our cucumber vines. We tightened our drawbacks right over the moat, lest the moat in our eyes be spectacles broke. Spectators, spectacular, speciously wrote. We ran round the block to get a new cloak. Yes, we ran round the block to get a new cloak. Oh, how we tried so, seeming similar thimbles, oracular symbol or ocular symbol, wrestling claws after claws, paucity claws. So in limbo, we limbo to the drop of their jaws. As in limbo, we limbo to the drop of their jaws. Let them joust with their spouse over goblets of dribble. What do we care whether drizzle or swizzle? Whatever it is, it's a stick in the middle. So lift up your cheese and give us a nibble. Yes, lift up your cheese and give us a nibble. I tell you, young poets, class up and go far. With smarts to get smarts in the skill of your art. Always cherish the treasure in the chest of your heart. And recognize this for cliche that it are. And recognize this for cliche that it are. I always have a lot of fun with that. So the next one I'm going to read is A Cat in the Lap. I'm a big Dr. Seuss fan. I read this at my own peril because I read this last month when I read at SpoFest. And right after I started reading it, a black mouse ran out from under the door of the closet and my cat started chasing it around the room. So we'll see if anything like that happens this time. A Cat in the Lap. I wish I had a cat or two to whisper to, a furry acrobat, to prance and spring and play with string. She'd gnaw on the cord till it snapped, put the ball in her paws, and then pause for a nap. She'd repay me nip or tap. If I tapped on her nose as she lay in my lap, if I tried to reach, she'd slap. The pages I turned to slap it back flat, and I would not even gasp. For as you all know, I bet everyone knows, at least everyone with the cat, that a cat in the lap is worth two in the hat. Okay, good. I don't see any mice. Okay, I better read this one because I invited my prosopagnosia faceblind group on Facebook and I promised them I would read this. Prosopagnosia, faceblind. I'm waiting in the face blind for the right face to scamper past, hunting in my bag of names. I have one I can attach, but will it be dead on, sure shot, or just another missing past? All faces seem like blanks to me, but to trees and hills I can relate. I never miss my acquaintance of a tree. Could it be 'cause they stay in the same place? With topographic maps, perhaps, at last, I'd learn your landscape. Then the human race might be to me more than just one face. It took a little bit of poetic license. I recognized more than one face, probably at least a half a dozen to a dozen, but you know, I've got a poetic license and I'm not afraid to use it. This next poem is called The Knot. It's about tying myself in knots. The Knot. I just want what I thought I had when I thought I didn't have what I wanted, which turned out not to be what I wanted anyway. I want what I don't have, and I don't know what I have. And I don't know why I want what I want, or what it is that I want. To have what I don't have, and to not want what I don't want, I would have to know what it is that you want. And you don't know what you want. And you don't know what I know about what I do and don't want. I want to pour myself into the container of what you don't know, don't say, don't have, and not wait. And even then, I'm not sure that's what I want. Not in, not out, not here, not there, not clue, not green, not felt, not seen. I cannot say what I want or how to know or where to go, but I'm just sure of this, that this poem will leave someone wanting. Okay, it looks like I have time for maybe one or two more. I'll read the leaf. The leaf for Maud on her passing. Our lives are so very short. We should spend each moment creating beauty and clinging to each other with the fierce, desperate love that then, only then, can we pay the proper reverence to our brief existence. We are leaves on the tree, budding, branching, reaching for the sun, reaching for each other. We grow vibrantly green, exhale the breath of life, and others breathe in what we've let out. We waft the song of creation into every ear that's peeled to listen. Then, at our peak, bursting with juiciness till it seems it just couldn't get any better, comes the first imperceptible hole of the caterpillar, eating us up with old age. We sear, turn yellow, curl brown at the edges, all the while thinking, but surely we've got this living thing down at last. Then we drop to the forest floor, blown on the wind, too insubstantive, too subtle, too volatile to remain in one form forever. The lungs of the earth breathe us in, and our sequestered, carbon-bound form decomposes, freeing the blank sheet of nature to compose of us again what you will. Okay, let's see. I want to read The Coming Blooming. The Coming Blooming. I asked my tree what day it planned to bloom. If you let me know by Thursday of the preceding week, I can take the day off work, I explained. The tree shook its crown as the wind sighed through its branches. Yes, said the tree, I do bloom in the day. In the morning, I wake and the ground begins to warm. My sap begins to rise. I leaf, I bud, I bloom. But which day? I insisted. On which morning? On which coming of the light do you bloom? There are many comings and goings of light in a day, said the tree. I think I understand, said I, not understanding at all. I work evenings, and it often gets dark while I'm eating lunch at work. I love the festival of pollination that my tree becomes on that one day a year when its blooming is at its fullest. Every blossom at once open. All the flying insects come to visit, from the smallest gnat to the largest bumblebee, flies, wasps, and winged ants. Amid a flurry of activity, white petals fall like snow. All come to pay their respects as if to the Christ child, and to spread the message of the millionth coming of the gift of pollen. Okay, I'm going to read just one more, and I think this is a good one to end on. It's Taps, Solo for Camera. I wrote this one when I was out near Sunset at Martha Thompson Nature Sanctuary in Liberty trying to take pictures, and it's the only poem I ever wrote where I start singing in the middle of it because it's taps. So this is Taps, Solo for Camera. In the words, the birds, I can't catch them, I can't catch them, blur by. I fasten onto the sky, but they exceed my grasp. Get your breath, get your breath, get your breath. The molten sun burns into my lens. Spots of red, dots of green. Light and leaves fall from the trees, from the hills, from the sky. Past the horizon, horses graze. Night is nigh. Thank you.
So thank you, Chloe. That was wonderful. Want to make a couple of announcements before we go on to our. I am not muted now, right? Everyone's hearing me?
Yes.
Okay. So Riverfront Readings does not have a reading schedule for July. A couple of events coming up from the Rogers Place page though. Tomorrow, June 12th, 2 to 3:30 p.m. in Luke's Park Garden Center Rose Room, a Rose Garden reading co-sponsored by the Kansas City Rose Society and the Rogers Place. Please wear a mask and observe social distancing, it says. The readers include James Benter, Pat Lawson, and Allery Tennille. And then June 18th, a Zoom Rogers Place reading with Kate Browder, George Bilger, and Sadiq Dukoji. And that is at 7 p.m. You can go to the Rogers Place website, get on their email list if you aren't already to get the details on that. And now we move on to our third and final reader, Divya Ramesh.
Who realized her video is off, so I'm sorry. I didn't realize I had turned that off midway.
Okay. Divya has moved across many states and has lived in many cities. She is grateful for a fluidity of geography that has allowed her to intimately see and understand this country. She moved to Kansas in 2017 quite by accident for a job in early childhood education research, has sprouted trenchant roots in prairie sod faster than she could have imagined. So although Arizona is home now, Kansas also holds a place in a motley heart. Divya has held many different jobs, most of them involving working with children or writing in some capacity. One of her hopes as a writer is to encourage children and youth to use poetry as a way to capture and engage forgotten histories. Divya has coordinated poetry and writing workshops for children and child advocacy professionals in almost all the cities in which she has lived. Her poems have appeared in Appalachian Heritage, the Latin American Literary Review, American Cordata, and a few other publications. Some of her favorite poets include her undergraduate mentor, Professor Gregory Janikian.
See, I told you you can do names, right?
I'm not through all of them yet. Casey Jewett, Ada Limon, Beth Ann Fenley, and J.H. Young. Divya moonlight as an aspiring picture book writer and graduate student. Anyone who knows Divya well reminds her to go to sleep. Please welcome Divya Ramesh.
I won't get that reminder today because I'm actually a couple hours behind you, although I am missing Kansas City with 111-degree weather over here. And I didn't realize this initially when Chloe was reading the Prosopagnosia poem, but it was fitting kind of where I fit in the sequence, because I have no idea how to put poems together in a collection. And this is the first time I've claimed 20 minutes to speak. Most of the time I get to be the lucky listener in the audience, thanking poets for existing. And I realized as I was kind of going through the things I was going to read, that they're all either fully or partially rooted in real people. And I tried to preserve the faces in the poetry. So it kind of links. But I will say that doing this in June started out hard because actually I lost a student this time last year, someone that I knew through a teaching program in West Philadelphia. And one thing that really bothered me was last year when that student passed away, mom was very willing and kind of, I don't know the word at the moment, but just resigned perhaps to saying, well, this kind of stuff happens here and he's going to become a statistic. And so in a way of making that not be the case, because otherwise I generally feel powerless as a poet, the first thing I'm going to read is to honor Muhammad, who I knew as a 4th grader. So what a teacher remembers. Part 1. I hold him in my memory, holding a fidget spinner, my own head spinning, the echo of that 1st grader rebounding in my brain. I hate Spanish. I can't even do English words yet. An afternoon pronouncing primavera. It came out primera, and sometimes peanut butter. Was I the teacher of pilfered promises? Teaching the wrong language first? More useful to make it to market, 56th and Chestnut, read the labels for peppers and potatoes and price, to puzzle P and B on paper, for pen, not pluma, for bucket, not balde. He pitched the fidget spinner across the hallway. It picked me. You can't catch, he giggled, but you ain't mad. Spinning, 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 settling us. I don't know if I was a very good teacher today. Muhammad, I'm Muhammad, and you're weird. Teachers don't say that. He took my papers and ran into the swarm of children eating in the cafeteria. My mama's from Africa, and his mama too, and you're the Spanish teacher, right? You know what the word for that is? He pressed my hand into the table and put his hand on mine. What about that? Launched into a handstand, hooked into my sweatshirt. Listen! A crack in the fan, sifting through a sound from a boombox. What's that? Spinning, spinning, spinning. The staccato bass stopped him until he searched me. Música, I said. Music. Part 2. Gunshot to the hand. That's the wrong music, Mama. I imagined it stilled him, spirit speeding in the hall. I've saved in memory your son, who was mine too. I want you to know that what you think, it isn't always true. That boys from this neighborhood become a statistic. You spin his shroud, and I will spin his story. After all, he gave me that fidget spinner. The second thing, from here, I guess I'll just go through. A lot of these are related to people, and I'll mention the city that they started in and go from there. So this was Northwest Montana. I don't remember the city. Prairie Wolf. She was a collie without a border, or calling perhaps, guarding nothing. How boundaries are scribbles of human hand. She does not know which stone is Swiss and which Italian, to switch them as she carries a child of the mountain in her bite to seed in a different soil, what someone calls the other side. This started after reading a book about Turkey and then sitting with a passenger in an airplane who was from Ankara. And this was during that bombing in Gaziantep where a lot of children were victims. So from a father left standing in Gaziantep. Searching for similes, stroking the locks on the lid of a coffin, catching the sun as the locks of her hair did once. I combed them. A car bomb burst. Fragments of fabric, blood of bone. She died, like confetti, celebrating her life. And this one's Tucson, Arizona. Crackers, spuds, stoop. I cannot remember when it didn't hurt to eat, curl fingers around crackers and cookies and milk. I cannot remember when my wrist wasn't raging to the touch of tomatoes spilling from the gazpacho. I cannot hold a spoon. You paint the peanut butter on the bread, place it where my hands can reach, patiently waiting until I can pinch off a piece of toast. Let me know your groceries, you say. Pedialyte, prescriptions, potatoes. But first, a person who places them beside me those nights I cannot remember what it is that I asked for. This one was rooted in a family that I ran into in a rural part of India where my parents are from. So bread rising. Between feed and freed is the radish harvest of last season, root vegetables gone rotten and scorched seed that could not survive this season's sun. Grandfather told me, we are slaves to our own sustenance, face pressed into the soil, searching, sowing the seed, spade turning wells. From altitude enough, the paddy fields look perforated. They sway in their planted rows, a dotted line between freedom and famine. The only difference between rice and rise is a voiced consonant. A child who has never chewed cannot make the sound of sprout breaking free of stalk. Maslow's myth of Sisyphus might be a man scaling a pyramid to reach the top, turning fantasy into fact. So this Sabbath, I sit beside my grandfather and show him the hemline of his great-granddaughter's wedding dress, slipping the selvage between my fingers to let out the stitches with scissors. And closer to home, Stamford, Connecticut. In the wake of Nellie A. Ryle, an oyster sloop. Under shade of luffed sail in oyster sloops, we sketch a silver sunset, stripped of gold by the white needle that threads the port of Stamford. Our charcoals trace the outlines of oysters, suffuse the skins of their shells in smoke. The sloops are searching where Nellie has swum, in waters limned with moonshine and only the image of oysters, where the beds are exhausted and it is time to sleep. And I've read a couple sad ones, so I'm going to skip this one that was witnessed in Chicago, but Pocatello, Idaho. Synesthesia. I find a paintbrush in Pocatello, this place that sounds as though it has mastered music. To take the bristle in a beat of blue tips and staccato on meadows. Mountain, bluebirds, plucking strings of song in a pointillism. It's performed pianissimo that only some can see. And someone earlier mentioned nature poetry. I think that might be the closest that I've tried to write to something to that end. And this was actually, I grew up in New Jersey. The only relevant indicator of that, I think, is my phone number now. But we were delayed at Newark Airport for many, many hours. And I was very occupied because I saw this person like getting ice off of the wing. And later, because we had to deplane, I got to talk to him and he told me his story. So this is his story and his face, to go back to that point about faces. A candidate for a pair of wings. I wondered then if the man standing on the metallic crane under the wing of a wider metal bird ever dreamt that this would be his dream of flying. If in a kindergarten full of tailors, firefighters, doctors, and pilots sounded the name of someone scraping ice off the plumage of a plane in spite of storm. Toothbrush and a touch, he understands crystalline to teach a chemist or mathematician, a sum taken forward as a subtraction from something left behind. With the brush, begin at the base of the bird, close to the body, trim to the tip of blaze. I wonder if he's ever afraid of falling and he tells me, you know, I wanted to be an engineer once. I'll take what slip gives me a second chance at flight. And time-wise, I think we're running short, right? Because we're ending at 7, so I could also stop.
Or you could continue.
Or I could continue. I'm being overconscious of time, I think. And so this came from a book, to be fair. I read No Violet Bulawayo's We Need New Names. She had come to Central Jersey to do a reading in 2016, and there is a section of her book that talks about kind of the sad side of NGOs. And it just stayed with me because it was from the perspective of children looking at these NGO workers and how the adults didn't like it, and the children thought that these were just star-studded people coming through. So from that came this poem, Those NGO People. Our wants are wide, like lasagna noodles. They make good leftovers, she says, as if we understand over and have seen the tops of muffins, or muffins like those. Our adults stand, their backs to lorries, our minds more accustomed to meniscus. Not mercury, but water. Our dehydration taken from us in a barter of bowls. Don't sit there and drink it like dogs, they say. Our adults are crying under the shades of Mopane. Petrol makes their eyes tear up, they say. We spray their water on our leaves, clean our plates of what came before. Atieke and Kejinu. She calls this white paste cheese. It's hot. It brands the tops of our tongues. And this was from Child Life Center, Greenville, South Carolina. Analog of healing. I've never broken a mercury thermometer. I imagine that silver like string, how it slims until one cannot see it, becomes stretched in the silence of warming glass. Unknown first that glass too can spill like stream off a stick. There is no cold, only a loss of heat that creates hardness or hull. Temper stretched is temperature, cool in the summer's swelter. There is snow later in the year, white like my splinted bone. It only hurts sometimes now. Stretch the leg to set it, after 6 months, for blood to flow where flesh was swollen. Those who have broken thermometers with a slip say it surprises them how quick silver clots. And this was, this was actually from Topeka. I went to the Brown v. Board of Education National Historic Site, and they have that section in there that talks about all the different individual cases that led to the ultimate Supreme Court decision. And there was just an image in one of those panels, and I had a chance after reading that to talk to the person at the gift shop desk, and she was just kind of talking about her experiences too in having traveled to those cities as sort of their archivist and historian. And we ended up kind of writing this together with kind of her images and my trying to put that into a poem. So, salt wounds that returned as rain. This formed of some theory. Firefighters and police fight to give it shape, their shouts, shooting for higher and higher registers to cut the cacophony. One man is taking attendance with one of those counters that sticks when you surpass 3 digits, as if knowing who's here would prevent who's not from getting shot, because that's how this ends inevitably. Our history prefers water to draw boundaries, in Ohio of soil, in Alabama of sound, not understanding how hoses like rivers empty somewhere. Estuary is where stream meets salt and stings. And I guess I'll read 2 more. This one is about rivers emptying somewhere. It did not start out in Arizona, but when I moved to Arizona, I went into the desert to find where the Colorado River ends. Not much luck. So if anyone has more guidance on that, I welcome it. daylighting the watercourse. The culverts carry carcasses choked with cadavers and their ironic counterparts, algal blooms. It seems unnatural, this, conduits carrying water and fish bones within their corrugates, leaving no alluvium. Piping pressed into surrounding soil, some gravel and sand simulate riverbed, now releasing rusts. And I'm above it, standing on some bridge looking down as if I've mastered motion by channeling a sip of the Mississippi into the sound of stones spilling away, slowly out of the way of water, towards stagnation in solemn pools that no cliff swallow could cross to spawn, pardon me. Sluice gates are similar too, like culverts, some contrivance to create the illusion of control, dying this way, and living too, coursing into the desert sun, with its scorched scars of stream sipping on the tribute of daylight. And this last one, actually, the first poem I read was about Muhammad and his mama, but she told me a story when he was alive. I went to, they were having trouble picking him up from school. And so I went and we walked back home. And then so she stayed and she talked about experiences growing up in the Ivory Coast, but also experiences of other people in that neighborhood that also had immigrated from Africa and what it was like to kind of be West African in West Philly. So no one wanted pied noir. Grandmother says to collect our finger follies and fracture them like eggshells over bowls made of glass. She does not call them swear words or birds. Her grandchildren will not turn animals, she says, when the hatching season is over and the starlings take flight. In a cloudburst of black, they rain droppings on our heads. What some would call a simpler word, my grandmother calls ordure, from the French word for fowl. Starlings spawn in the south of France, she says, songbirds schooled in a prosody that softens the sharpness of stench or speech. Ordure sounds like endure, to harden like the gougere hors d'oeuvres that my grandmother is cooling now on the steel rack in the kitchen, sliced in half and spilling Buheza cheese from their steam vents. They recall the amber yolks of their origin. My grandmother was both the mother and daughter of Algerian famine. A hunger for independence expelled her from Mostaganem, kneading semolina into the farine between her fingers. And it was a startling migration of songbirds with black feet singing a French anthem by mistake.
Thank you. That concludes our reading. Michelle Pond, Claire Wagner, Divya, Ramesh. Let's put yourselves off mute and give them a round of applause.